Hello, crypto world! Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. So in this video, I'd like to talk about Casper. I'd like to give an update on how I see things playing out. I'd also like to throw out a possibility for you to be aware of. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this, but nonetheless, I think it's something that we should be aware of and on the lookout for further confirmation. To begin this video, I'd like to start off at the beginning. So at the very beginning of this chart now, I am using charts.cointrader Pro, and this allows me to go further back than TradingView does. It also allows me to go back on a very small time frame. So this time is actually pre-big trading for Casper. It starts in 2021, so April 2021, and it goes roughly to May 2021. The reason why I'm starting at this point is because these series of structures, they repeat, and what's interesting about it is today's Casper has been following these structures. So for those of you who are familiar with this structure, bear with me. For those of you who are new, I'll briefly explain it. So Casper starts with a move up. Now this move up is the same structurally as this one and this one over here. After this move up, it comes to a peak, it pulls back, and it does this wavy kind of topping structure. It then declines, comes to a low or a bottoming out, and then it moves up into another series of fractals. This is a sideways range-bound time. So this first fractal price moves up, it then pulls back, it moves back up again, and it winds its way down to a point before entering the next fractal. In the next fractal, price moves up again, it drops, goes sideways, moves up again, and creates this bowl, and then it winds its way down to a point, or in this case it goes flat and then drops, and then to end this sideways range-bound time, it ends with a bounce. After this, it goes into the next move up / bull run structure, which is the same as this one. Now, this one is missing the very beginning part. However, we have it over here. It moves up and does the same thing, pulls back, does that waving topping structure, and then it moves down, price moves down, comes to a low or a bottoming out part. Notice how there's this bounce at the bottom here. We have the same thing, just much larger over here, after which price moves up. Now, this move up took place fairly rapidly. It was one candle, it moved up, it moved back down, it moved back up again in the same way that this one did the same. Moved up, moved down, moved back up again, and then it winded its way down to a point. So we have that move up, move down, move back up, and it winds its way to a point. Both of them kind of go sideways after this. This one kind of angles down. This one goes more sideways. It then enters the next fractal. Price moves up, it declines, goes sideways, moves back up again, and creates that bowl type structure that we see over here. It then winds its way down to a point. And this one's a little different in the sense that this one kind of goes flat and then drops. This one just kind of winds its way downward to a point before coming to the final fractal in that sideways range-bound time, which is a bounce. We see that over here. After that bounce, it enters the bull run structure again, and this one is just massive. So it really shoots up there. This one went to like $40. Now, the timing, height, and depth whenever a fractal repeats is always going to be original. So you can have the same structure repeat on a very large time frame or on a very small time frame. It gets more intricate. Parts of a fractal, parts of a bigger structure can have parts that are historically maybe were small and then they repeat once again large and vice versa. So the timing, the height and depth, it's a very fluid thing. Parts of structures can play out very large or very small, or the whole entire structure can play out very large or very small. So after this, price declines, it pulls back, just like we saw over here in these ones. let's zoom in. It pulled back, and then it did that wave kind of topping type structure that we saw over here as well. Now, this one, this time, does it way down here. It seriously crashes after this peak it makes way up here in the $40 range. It crashes, does that waving structure way down here. Now, we need to go to a larger time frame because Casper starts playing out on a much larger time frame. It goes much slower. So I'm on an hour candle here. I'm going to jump to a day candle. So after this structure right here, this waving topping structure, which played out over here and over here on this one, but this one played out much lower. It then goes into that declining part right here where it declines and comes to a bottoming out. So this is going to be viewed on a day candle. So here we are on a day candle. So this is that bottoming out thing. And it has that bounce just like we see here and like we see over here. This time it was small. Price moves up into the sideways range-bound fractal, the first one. It moves up, moves back down, moves back up again, and then winds its way down to a point. Just like we see with this one, remember it did it in one candle. It moved up, moved back down, moved back up again, and winds its way to a point. And just like the next fractal, price moves up, it drops, goes flat and sideways, and then moves up again, creating that bowl structure. So here is that bowl structure, and then it winds its way down to a point. So then we have the bounce, which we see on the early structures over here. After this bounce, this is where the bull run structure technically begins. So this green box is where it played out on a very large time frame, and over here, this played out on a very short time frame. So here we are zoomed in on a 5-minute candle. This is how short it played out. So there's two iterations of this. This first one is the real short one. So price moves up in this first wave right here. It then comes to a second wave, and then finally a third wave that's the highest. It then crashes down into wave 1 zone, and then it goes flat, does this little bounce right here before it begins to more aggressively move up into the next structure. Now, that was right here, that little green box. Over here, it plays out much larger. So here is that first wave, which was this one, then moves up into the second wave, which was this one, and then finally the third wave right here. However, this one does not come crashing down as this one did into wave 1 zone. So we have two different iterations of this, after which it moves into the next bull run structure. Now on today's chart, we have the first wave, wave 1, which is right here. Wave 2 is right here on the first time this did this. And finally, we have wave 3, which makes it higher than wave 2 and comes crashing down into wave 1 zone. Just like we see here, wave 3 comes crashing down into wave 1 zone. On today's chart, we have this massive bounce right here that we're still working through. So where does this come from? Well, it is my belief that this right here is the same thing. It's a bounce. It just played out on a much smaller scale than what this is doing today. So if we were to copy this a little larger so we could see it, we would see that price bottoms out, but then it kind of meanders a little lower. Then it does that bounce. And this bounce actually ends lower than this part here. It then bottoms out and then begins to move up. Well, we see the same idea playing out over here. So on the third wave, it comes crashing down into wave 1 zone. It then kind of bottoms out, but it meanders a bit lower. And then we have this wave that bottoms out lower than over here. So this part is lower than over here. Now, it even went lower. So in my last video, I talked about this potentially dropping into this zone, and if it did that, we would potentially still be working out this bottoming out part right here. However, with it dropping lower, it could potentially be still part of this decline, and we haven't really reached the true bottom yet. We need to form the bottoming out part, and then the move up will begin after that. we'll have to see how this plays out. So in this option, we still haven't reached this flat area potentially, and it would be somewhere further down, or maybe we're close to it, I don't know. And then we'd have to form this bottoming out structure, however that ends up looking. Usually a flat line in the chart represents bounces. It just represents some kind of bottoming out structure. It could look like this, for instance. Or here's another option. It could be something like this. This is all part of that bottoming out structure, and then it will go into this. So even though it's gone a little lower, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not part of this bottoming out structure. It's just a final push down. That is a possibility. How do we know when we're out of this, whether it's this here or we're still in the move down and we still have to go through it? Well, once we start going through something like this where price begins to move up more aggressively, then we know that we're out of it. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss that thing that I was alluding to in the beginning part of the video, something that you should be aware of. So if we were to step back, and this is that structure, that bottoming out structure where it does that bounce at the bottom. It's like we see over here, it declines, does the bounce, or if you will, over here it declines, does that bounce, and then it moves into the sideways range-bound time. In that sideways range-bound time, price moves up. There actually is a candle that we discussed here. Price moves up, it pulls back, moves back up again, and winds its way down to a point. Just like we see in this fractal right here, price moved up, pulled back, moved back up again, winds its way down to a point. After that, we have that bowl structure where price moves up, pulls back, kind of goes sideways. This one goes more at an angle. It's actually a very similar structure. This just played out on a much larger time frame, so it's much more granular. We have much more clarity in it. It comes to a peak. It then winds its way down to a point. So this was that bounce after. So here's that bowl structure. Price moves up, moves back down, goes flat sideways. You even see the features that exist in this part right here, and then it moves up, and then it winds its way down to a point. So these features, by the way, they're just larger on today's chart. So after it winds its way down, it does that bounce. On today's chart, it potentially played out very small. However, if we were to get rid of some of this, we see that this is, in some ways, a very large bounce. So here is my thing, and I'm not saying that this is the case, but it's something that you should be aware of. This large bounce could potentially be this or this right over here. Now, I originally thought this ended right here, and I was like, oh man, this large move up, that is not part of the bounce. But as this has played out, and my goal is not to be all over the map here, as this has played out, I can't help but question with this drop where it drops really low, could this just be a very large version of this bounce? Now, if we go back, it doesn't look the same. These bounces tend to be a bit more uniform without these massive peaks that we see over here. So that part makes me question, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just this playing out on a very large scale. And there's a very good chance that that is the case. But I do want to throw that idea of this being a massive bounce. This bounce, the last time it played out, it brought Casper to a low, which was quite intense. And we're seeing something similar on today's chart. That doesn't mean that this small little bounce took place here. It can play out on a large time frame, and it does end up lower than this part of the bounce. We're seeing all that play out over here. So how would we know if this is indeed the first bull run structure or a very large iteration of a bounce that ends the sideways range-bound time? Well, what I would look for is, okay, if this is indeed a bull run structure, we should see something like this begin to materialize, where price begins to move up aggressively, and it starts moving up more aggressively as time moves on. Of course, you do have these steep pullbacks, but it all is kind of mapped out already in a bull run structure. If we start repeating something similar to this, in other words, we start seeing this begin to play out, or we see something like this play out instead of something that resembles this or this, then we would have to say, you know what, maybe what we are experiencing over here is actually just a very large iteration of this. Now, again, I'm not trying to be all over the map. I'm not trying to change my analysis. My primary analysis is that we are doing this first bull run structure. But I do want to remain open that we could potentially be doing something like this. And at this point, I can't say definitely that this is the case. It's just one of those nagging little details in the back of my mind that as today's chart has played out, it does resemble a bounce, and I don't want to ignore it. So you guys can be on the lookout for bull run structures that resemble the second stage or the second corrective phase that we would eventually move into. Even this right here, this pullback. If we start seeing stuff like that, then yeah, we're in the bull run structure. But if we start seeing something like this play out or something like this materialize, then we know that this here was actually this. So as of now, my primary analysis is that we are in the first bull run structure. All this matches beautifully. This right here is just very large and going very deep. It's possible that it's doing that. This will remain my primary analysis until something makes me change my mind. So there you have it. I'd like to know what you guys think about all of this. Feel free to put your thoughts in the comments. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but I am grateful that you took the time to watch this video. If you did find it helpful, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not a subscriber to this channel, but you enjoyed this technical analysis, this is unique technical analysis. You're not going to find it anywhere else. I recommend hitting that subscribe button. I'll continue to follow up on this chart as it continues to develop. Whether we're in the first bull run structure or we're in the bounce, we still got good days ahead of us. Even though times have been challenging as of late, there is light at the end of this tunnel, folks. So don't lose hope. We're entering the best times in crypto with the coming bull run structures that are coming up on many crypto charts. So hold on to your hats. Life is going to get exciting. Oh, and if you're interested, I have a Patreon page where I have videos that are dedicated to the Casper bull run. And the main thing is I have a Discord connected to that Patreon. It's a $5 a month subscription. If it's something that you're interested in, I'll put a link in the description of this video. I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.